Have you ever noticed that people can explain almost anything after it happens? A relationship ends, and suddenly they say, "I knew it was coming." A business fails, and people say, "The signs were always there." Someone becomes successful, and everyone creates a perfect story. He was disciplined, confident, different, and destined to win. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of the time, we are not explaining reality. We are creating a story that makes reality feel less random. This is the psychology of people who create stories to feel in control. And according to Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, this habit comes from the way our mind works. Our brain does not like uncertainty. It does not like randomness. It does not like gaps. So when something happens, the mind quickly tries to connect the dots and create a clean explanation. Part 1. Your mind wants a coherent story. Kahneman explains that our mind works through two systems. System 1 is fast, automatic, emotional, and effortless. System 2 is slower, more logical, more deliberate, and requires mental effort. Most people believe they are controlled by System 2, the rational part of the mind. But Kahneman says System 1 is far more powerful than we realize. It quietly creates impressions, feelings, and intuitive judgments, and then System 2 often accepts them. This is where stories begin. System 1 is always trying to make sense of the world. It takes whatever information is available and turns it into a simple, coherent explanation. It does not wait for complete evidence. It does not naturally think statistically. It prefers association, emotion, cause and effect, and simple meaning. That is why people often create stories even when they do not have enough information. They see one event, connect it to another event, and suddenly they feel like they understand the whole situation. But understanding is not always the same as truth. Sometimes it is just a story that feels true. Part 2. We hate randomness. One of the biggest ideas in the book is that people underestimate the role of chance. Kahneman says, we often overestimate how much we understand about the world and underestimate the role of luck and uncertainty. This is part of overconfidence. And hindsight makes it worse because after something happens, it feels more predictable than it really was. Think about success stories. When someone becomes famous, rich, or powerful, people create a neat story about why it happened. They say, he always had the mindset. She was built different. He made all the right moves. She knew exactly what she was doing. But in real life, success is not always that clean. Kahneman points out that luck plays a major role in success stories, and it is often easy to imagine a small change that could have turned a great outcome into an average one. But people do not like that. Randomness feels uncomfortable. If success contains luck, then the world feels less controllable. If failure contains chance, then life feels less predictable. So the mind creates a story. A story gives comfort. A story gives control. A story says, this happened for a clear reason, even when the real reason is more complicated. Part 3. Hindsight makes us feel smarter than we are. After an event happens, our brain changes the way we see the past. Before the event, the future was uncertain. After the event, the past looks obvious. This is the illusion of hindsight. A person may not truly predict a breakup, a failure, a market crash, or someone's betrayal. But once it happens, the mind starts collecting memories that support the final outcome. You remember the red flags. You remember the small signs. You remember the strange behavior. And suddenly, the story becomes, I knew it all along. But did you really know? Or did your mind rewrite the past after the ending became clear? This is why people create stories to feel in control. Hindsight gives them the feeling that the world was predictable. It makes them believe they understood the situation from the beginning. But Kahneman warns that this feeling can be misleading. We are often too confident in our explanations and too unaware of what we did not know before the outcome happened. Part 4. Stories feel better than statistics. Another reason people create stories is because stories are easier than statistics. Kahneman explains that the mind easily thinks associatively, metaphorically, and causally. But statistical thinking is difficult because it requires considering many things at once. That means people prefer a personal story over a probability. For example, imagine someone says, he failed because he was lazy. That explanation feels simple. It gives you a cause. It gives you a character judgment. It gives you emotional closure. But the real explanation could include timing, environment, resources, opportunity, stress, competition, health, luck, bad information, and many other factors. System 2 could analyze all of that. But System 2 is effortful. System 1 wants a fast answer, so it creates a simple story. And because the story is simple, it feels true. This is dangerous because a simple story can hide a complex reality. Part 5. The brain answers an easier question. Kahneman explains that when the mind faces a difficult question, it often answers an easier question instead, without noticing the switch. For example, the difficult question might be, why did this person really fail? But the easier question becomes, Can I think of one obvious weakness in this person? The difficult question might be, was this decision actually wise? But the easier question becomes, do I feel good about this decision? The difficult question might be, was this outcome caused by skill, luck, or both? But the easier question becomes, does the story sound convincing? This is how people create stories to feel in control. They do not always answer the real question. They answer the question that feels easier. And then they mistake that answer for truth. Part 6. The availability trap. Another concept from the book is the availability heuristic. This means people judge the importance or frequency of something by how easily examples come to mind. If something is easy to remember, it feels more common. If something is dramatic, emotional, or recently discussed, it feels more important. Kahneman gives examples of how media coverage can make certain topics feel more important in public attention, while less dramatic but important issues get ignored. This affects the stories people create. If a person has recently seen 3 stories about betrayal, they may start believing betrayal is everywhere. If they have seen many success videos, they may believe success follows one clear formula. If they remember one painful event, they may create a life story around it. The mind uses what is available and builds a story from it, but what is available is not always what is accurate. Part 7. Stories protect the ego. People also create stories because stories protect them emotionally. A confusing world is painful. A random failure is painful. A loss without clear meaning is painful. So the mind creates explanations. Sometimes the story says, I failed because people were against me. Sometimes it says, they succeeded because they were lucky. Sometimes it says, I was right, but the world was wrong. These stories may reduce discomfort, but they can also prevent growth. Because if your story is wrong, your lesson will also be wrong. And if your lesson is wrong, you may repeat the same mistake again. This is why Kahneman's book focuses so much on recognizing errors of judgment. He says it is easier to see other people's mistakes than our own, but having better language for biases can help us understand judgment and choices more clearly. Part 8. The illusion of control. The deepest reason people create stories is control. A story makes life feel predictable. It says, this happened because of that. This person acted this way because of this reason. This result was inevitable. But life is not always that clean. Sometimes we do not know enough. Sometimes chance plays a role. Sometimes our first explanation is only an illusion. And sometimes the story we believe is not reality. It is just System 1 trying to make reality easier to understand. The problem is not that stories are always bad. Stories help us think. Stories help us remember. Stories help us communicate. The problem begins when we forget that a story is only a story, not proof, not certainty, not complete truth. Conclusion. So, what is the psychology of people who create stories to feel in control? It is the psychology of a mind that wants certainty in an uncertain world. It is System 1 creating quick explanations. It is hindsight making the past look obvious. It is overconfidence making us believe we understand more than we do. It is availability making easy memories feel like strong evidence. And it is our discomfort with randomness that pushes us to turn messy reality into clean stories. The lesson from thinking fast and slow is simple. Do not trust every story your mind creates. Sometimes your brain is not revealing the truth. Sometimes it is just trying to protect you from uncertainty. And the moment you understand that, you become less controlled by your own explanations.